We begin today with a live look at the White House as America now knows who will be the next president of the United States. Aloha and good afternoon. I'm Dylan Ancheta in the Hawaii News Now Digital Center. America experienced the election last night and Donald Trump is heading back to the White House. It's the first time in U.S. history that a convicted felon has the title of president-elect. CBS's Jared Hill reports on the former president's victory this time around, which is a story of voter turnout.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people.
Overnight, Donald Trump relished in what his supporters call the greatest political comeback in American history.
We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Trump's campaign strategy to appeal to people who don't vote frequently in key battleground states worked, ultimately putting him well over the required 270 electoral votes. And it's what played out in make or break Pennsylvania.
People who voted early, they went overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. But then what happened yesterday? Boom, Donald Trump turned out more people day of.
Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign has always said if she loses, she'll concede the race. And today, she made the call to her opponent. She's also expected to address supporters at her alma mater, Howard University.
You won't hear from the vice president tonight.
The crowd there dispersed last night after learning Harris wouldn't make an appearance. As Team Trump prepares to head back to the White House, they're calling for hope and optimism.
He is going to be a president for all Americans.
Senior advisor Jason Miller says the president-elect can hit the ground running with executive orders.
He can simply flip the switch on day one, secure the border, start the energy exploration again, which will help with reducing inflation, making things more affordable.
A vast majority of voters nationwide described the economy as bad. It was a top concern among Trump voters. Jared Hill, CBS News, the White House.
Now, Vice President Kamala Harris has called President-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him on winning the election. According to a senior Harris aide, she discussed the importance of a peaceful transfer of power and being a president for all Americans. A Trump campaign spokesperson confirmed the call, saying that Trump acknowledged Vice President Harris on her strength, professionalism, and tenacity throughout the campaign. Two other Harris aides said Harris spent the morning and afternoon working on her concession speech. President Joe Biden also called President-elect Trump and reportedly plans to speak publicly about the election results Thursday. And a short time ago, Vice President Harris delivered her concession speech at her alma mater, Howard University in Washington, D.C.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
There are also ongoing questions surrounding President-elect Trump's ongoing criminal cases. For more on that, here's our affiliates at NBC News.
Hey there, good evening. It looks like at least some of Mr. Trump's legal troubles could be soon going away, at least on the criminal front. NBC News can now report that the Justice Department has begun discussions about potentially winding down the two outstanding federal criminal cases against Mr. Trump. You'll remember there's one in Washington, D.C. for election interference, also one in Florida about classified documents, hoarding classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. Justice Department officials realizing they have no hope of going to trial anytime soon and winding them down before he returns to the White House. We're going to break down what that could mean all ahead on NBC Nightly News. Back to you.
Our affiliates also spoke to voters after the election to get their reaction to the results. Here's some of what voters said on the continent.
Sad. I want a kinder nation. I'm raising kids, and it's a hard it's a hard pill to swallow. So we'll brace for the next 4 years and keep putting goodness out into the world.
She completely misread her constituents, and it wasn't as tight as it should have been. And I think that Democrats are going to have to reckon with that. Democrats are going to have to reckon with the fact that constituents are not happy with U.S. foreign policy, and that's enough to shift an election.
I think we're beyond joking now. This is kind of like, now it's kind of serious. Will it be the end of the U.S.? Of course not. This is an ongoing experiment. So I do have faith in the country, just not in the short term. We got to go through whatever it is we're going through.
I've been a Republican my whole life, and I think this nation voted without a conscience. And I think there's going to be a huge case of buyer's remorse.
Last night I was watching the whole election the whole night, the whole thing, and I'm like, oh my God, Trump's about to win. And then when he won, I was like, oh my God, let's make America great again.
Democrats seem to just stick with the party line, and I don't think that they really look at the numbers, or I think they make decisions with a little more emotion and less analytical. I mean, like I said, I set aside all the hate speech that's going on back and forth between both parties. They're both equally guilty of, ridiculous things. But again, at the end of the day, I just look at track record, and I felt that, the country was better off and more well managed under Trump.
Internationally, specifically in the Middle East, all eyes are now on Donald Trump and his plans to intervene in the raging conflicts between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called Trump's election win history's greatest comeback. NBC's Raf Sanchez has more.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thrilled with this American election result. Some far-right members of his government really made no secret of the fact they were hoping Trump would win. Now that he has, they think it may lead to a more hawkish U.S. position on Iran, less American pressure on Israel over the Palestinians. But they are acutely aware that Trump has also promised to end the war in the Middle East. One Israeli official telling me they think Netanyahu might try to sign a ceasefire deal early in Trump's next term, trying to hand the new president a quick diplomatic victory. Israel's government concerns that the outgoing Biden administration could step up pressure in its final weeks in office. The U.S. has said Israel has until next week to allow more aid into Gaza or face a potential cutback in American military support. The U.S. says so far Israel is failing to meet that deadline. The domestic politics here in Israel very tense right now. Last night, while all eyes were on the voting in the U.S., Netanyahu fired his defense minister, a man he has clashed with publicly over the prospect of a ceasefire deal. That led to major demonstrations on the streets of Tel Aviv, crowds calling for a deal to finally bring those hostages home. So the Middle East very much in flux right now as the big players try to figure out what this historic American election means for them. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Modi'in, Israel.
Looking now to the makeup of Congress, Republicans reclaimed the majority in the Senate, winning 3 crucial races. Control of the House of Representatives at this time remains unclear, and abortion rights measures prevailed in 7 out of 10 states. CBS's Michael George breaks it all down for us.
First-time Republican candidate Bernie Moreno won his bid to unseat Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown in Ohio's Senate race, one of several contests that helped Republicans retake control of the Senate.
Certainly a happy day for the GOP.
In deep red Montana, Republican Tim Sheehy bested incumbent Democrat John Tester, and West Virginia Governor Jim Justice won in his state. The seat had been held by independent Senator Joe Manchin, who caucused with Democrats for 14 years and announced his retirement. It could be days before it's clear which party will control the U.S. House of Representatives. Democrats flipped 2 key seats in upstate New York. In New York's 19th district, Republican Representative Mark Molinaro lost to Democrat Josh Riley.
I believe in upstate New York, I believe in all of you, and I believe in our promise and our potential.
Millions of Americans also weighed in on abortion rights in 10 states. There were wins in 7 states, including here in New York. Measures also passed in Colorado, Maryland, Montana, Nevada, Arizona, and Missouri, which currently bans abortion entirely with the exception of medical emergencies.
We are anticipating a tough legislative session. So we are ready to fight and to make sure that whatever they're going to throw at us, because we know it's going to happen, that all of the volunteers who mobilized continue to show up.
Abortion opponents prevailed in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Florida. Only about 57% of voters supported the measure in the Sunshine State. They needed 60%.
It is still a historic outcome that demonstrates how the majority of Floridians oppose Governor DeSantis' 6-week abortion ban.
Abortion rights advocates say they'll continue to fight to overturn Florida's 6-week ban. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
And here's some more local reaction to last night's election, starting with Governor Green.
From a political ideology standpoint, it doesn't change anything. We need housing and affordability. Interestingly, I was cutting taxes pretty aggressively, and that may very well be the flavor of the month with the new administration. But yeah, it hurts because our senators and reps may very well not have as good committee assignments and not have the same kind of influence. But they are terrific people. They will work across the aisle, I'm sure. I have a lot of relationships with Democrat and Republican governors, and that hasn't changed. So I'm going to go forward to make sure that we meet our needs, but it might be more difficult from a financial standpoint because what has historically happened, and remember, I was lieutenant governor under President Trump when he was president the first time. Sometimes there are talks about deep cuts to Medicaid. Some of our social safety net could be challenged. They talk about block grants a lot when they get into power. But I've navigated it before, I'll navigate it again.
In addition to the wins on the national stage, we are so excited to have gained 3 seats in the House and another senator in the Senate. So, and they're all on the West Side. And so we are excited that our folks are actually getting out to vote. We have great candidates, and I think there is a shift. And I think there is a bit of a shift to make sure that there are a more balanced two-party system here in Hawaii.
And joining us now for a recap of our local election results is our political reporter, Daryl Huff. Daryl, right off the bat, we know there were some big races we were keeping an eye on, including the mayor for Hawaii Island. Tell us what happened there.
Well, the big story of the night, obviously, was that Mayor Mitch Roth, who's been mayor on the Big Island for 4 years, was unelected, and Kimo Alameda, a healthcare executive, community activist, was elected by about 5,000 votes, so it wasn't particularly close. Alameda ran a good campaign. He also had a lot of union endorsements. And there's some question about whether Mitch Roth was good enough as tooting his own horn as a mayor. I think that might have been part of his problem. He's a fairly humble guy, very businesslike. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next. The Big Island is known for turning over its mayors pretty regularly.
And I also want to ask you about some of the Republicans in our Hawaii state legislature. During the first printout, there was one race that was separated by 8 votes or so?
Well, yeah. So as the night wore on, and of course we could talk also briefly about the lines that were just dominated the election coverage last night. But it was a big night for the Hawaii Republican Party in terms of the legislature. The race you're talking about was Brenton Awa versus Ben Schaefer on the North Shore and Windward Oahu. And as the first printout came out, Brenton Awa was either behind or ahead, but it was an only 8-vote difference. The second printout came out, and all of those votes that were people who were walking in late, including Brenton Awa, who walked in and was among the last voters at Kapolei Hale, completely flipped that race, and pretty much Brenton Awa ended up winning. I don't have the number right in front of me, but by a few hundred votes, several hundred votes. Elsewhere, we also saw a Republican pick up in the state Senate because Samantha DeCourt beat former state representative Cedric Gates in a Senate seat on the West Oahu. West Oahu, Kapolei, and Ewa have become the new Republican bastion in Hawaii. It used to be Hawaii Kai, Kailua, West Hawaii, Maui, Central Maui. Now it is the working class neighborhoods of Oahu, Ewa, Kapolei, West Oahu. And I talked with political expert Colin Moore today who said that's reflective of the entire nation. The working class has become the center of the Republican Party.
And also the race with Elijah Pierik and
Right. That one, at the last check, that was only a 70-vote margin. So that race could still flip. But even if it does not, if Elijah Pierik is defeated by Corey Rosenlee, you still have two more Republicans in the state house, because Rose Martinez, who's also in Eva, lost to a Republican. Micah Ayu in Kalihi lost to a Republican challenger. So they picked up at least 2, possibly 3 seats. Oh, Chris Baroka, another Republican, won in West Oahu, taking Cedric Gates' old seat. So Republicans picked up 2 members in the state house and a member in the state senate. That's like a 30% increase for them.
A lot of shifts going on for sure. And let's also talk about the constitutional amendment. Of course, the First Amendment was a hot topic. Tell us about that one.
Kind of hot topic. I think that, what you saw was it wasn't overwhelmingly supported, but it got a majority of vote, and that would help protect same-sex marriage in Hawaii by removing the legislature's ability to reserve marriage to opposite-sex couples. All the other constitutional amendments, most of them were technical, passed. All of the Honolulu and Kauai and Maui charter amendments passed. One charter amendment on the Big Island did not, and that was to extend the terms of the Good Government Commission. So pretty much people went along with it. Donald Trump did not get any more votes this year than he did in the past. So we didn't see any shift to the Republican Party in Hawaii.
Got it. Well, our Daryl Huff keeping an eye on all our local races. Daryl, thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure, Dylan. Thanks.
And here in Hawaii, casting your vote in person was a bit of a challenge yesterday, and it wasn't just because of the rain. There were long lines at Honolulu Hale and Kapolei Hale. Some people waited hours to cast their votes. Meanwhile, some residents weren't able to turn in their mail-in ballots. We spoke with Cameron Kurt from Common Cause Hawaii, who shared why this year's in-person voting was longer than usual.
If you're going to have the mail-in option, then we do have to have accessible and multiple accessible places in person. Meaning, if you look at Oahu, it's the most populous island in the state chain. However, there are only 2 places to vote in person on election day. That's asinine. And anybody saying anything different is lying.
We also spoke to West Oahu Councilwoman Andrea Tupola, who said that there needs to be an awareness that people will want to vote on election day with larger and potentially more voting sites. But also, voters need to be educated.
I was the very last person online that basically get this like a purple piece of paper that allowed you to cast your ballot. So I feel like a sumo wrestler who was on a diet for 6 months and it's finally over.
Now, Tupola pointed out that this is only the second presidential election with the all-mail system and that there are lessons to be learned. Let's send you live now once again to the White House. As you can see, the sun is setting there in Washington, D.C. Stay with us. We'll have more news and your local weather after this short break.
tells it on this Wednesday, the heavy rain threat has ended. It's now moving to the south of us, and we're seeing some scattered showers move in with a weak front. Most of the showers coming in with that weak front are of the light to moderate variety, so flooding should not be an issue over the next several days. However, it is going to be rather windy, and it is going to remain damp for those windward areas. But because the winds will be running pretty firm, whatever rain comes in will also be moving out very quickly. Now, the rain will focus mainly in the early morning and overnight hours. Middle part of the day should be fairly dry for leeward sides especially. High temperatures running a little bit cooler to about 86 today in Honolulu. So it's going to get a little bit of a boost later this afternoon. 6 to 8 feet in the country below advisory levels, 2 to 4 on the east side where the choppiness continues. And keep in mind, early next week, maybe Sunday, Monday, we could see another solid advisory level swell. So this is what we're looking at. Breezy winds for the next several days, especially windy today, and a little damp for those windward neighborhoods probably through Sunday. Drier conditions expected to take over Monday.
In other news around the island, some breaking news overnight. A 23-year-old man is dead after a high-speed crash in the Ahui Manu area. It happened around 8:50 last night near Hui Kelu Street and Aka Place. HPD says the driver was speeding when he hit two unoccupied parked vehicles. The car then plowed into a rock wall. Neither the driver or his two passengers were wearing seatbelts at the time. EMS rushed them all to the hospital where the driver died. The passengers, both men in their 20s, are in serious condition. It's not believed the driver had been impaired at the time of the crash. In today's news from the feeds, the holidays are practically here, and it's now time to start thinking about your budgets. In today's Consumer Watch, Jen Sullivan looks at shopping trends and how to avoid the holidays from hurting your finances.
It's the season of giving, but if you're not careful with finances, you could be getting a hefty bill at the end of the holiday season. Experts say shopping as early as now can help you budget.
We have seen a trend over the last couple of years of consumers starting their shopping a little earlier for the winter holidays.
Catherine Cullen with the National Retail Federation says holiday spending this year is expected to hit an all-time high, with shoppers spending an average of $902 per person, about $641 going towards gifts and the rest towards food, cards, and decor. There is some good news for shoppers this year.
We do know that in many ways inflation has gotten better than it was last year, particularly when it comes to goods, which is great news for consumers.
A recent survey by NerdWallet found 28% of shoppers who used credit cards to buy gifts last year are still paying off that debt. So, how can you make sure you don't overspend?
The best thing to do is to really make a plan before you start spending. Ideally, we want to use our savings and not debt to fund those purchases.
NerdWallet personal finance expert Kimberly Palmer also recommends these tips. Make a list and figure out exactly how much you want to spend. Start shopping early. Talk to family and friends about expectations and possibly scaling back. And sign up for price drop alerts.
Using some kind of browser add-on like Honey or the Camelizer browser extension just to track those prices can just help make sure that you're getting the best deal possible.
For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
And meet the Honolulu Zoo's new mayor. Makamai is a male pueo, a native Hawaiian short-eared owl. He came to the Honolulu Zoo in 2016 from Kauai. Makamai defeated his opponent, Jaws, a Galapagos tortoise, in a virtual election on the zoo's Facebook and Instagram pages. But not all is lost for Jaws, who is one of the zoo's oldest residents, having been there since 1929. He was named Director of Habitat Protection and Chief Conservation Officer. Zoo officials said the contest was designed to bring attention to the challenges endangered and threatened species face. And in some other good news from over the weekend, the balloons for the annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade made their first test flight in Rutherford, New Jersey. This year marks the 98th Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The annual Balloon Fest flight test serves as an opportunity to take all new character balloons that crews have been building and testing indoors out on a field test, and it gives a sneak peek of the new balloons. The parade will feature 17 giant character balloons, 22 floats, 15 novelty and heritage inflatables, 11 marching bands, 700 clowns, and 10 performance groups. New and returning characters will take flight for the holiday tradition, which begins at 8:30 a.m. on November 28th. So exciting, such a fun time of year. We thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of This Is Now. Be sure to tune into our evening newscast starting at 4 p.m. along with Investigates TV coming up right after this. Aloha.